Hello and welcome back to What's Millie Making, where I'm Millie, and this is a space where I talk about the past, present, and future of my making, mostly knitting. Today's video is all knitting because I'm talking about my fall knitting plans, but because it is a little late, I'm just going to call this my end of the year knitting plan. So what I would love to knit from October to December. If you just want to get into the patterns and the yarn trim stash that I would like to knit these patterns in, you can just skip to the next chapter, but first, I wanted to talk a little bit about how I formulated these plans and what my goals are for my fall knitting. So when it comes to like my personal style and what I'm influenced by online, I feel like there's definitely two mindsets. Like on one hand, I am influenced by like what the personal style bloggers, influencers, brands, stores, general style stuff that everyday people are influenced by. But then there's also the other part, which is influenced by the knitting online space, what patterns designers are releasing, what's trending in patterns, what other people are knitting online. And I feel like there's not necessarily always an overlap between what is popular in one space and what's popular in the other. And in the past, that's kind of left me knitting things that I've enjoyed making and enjoyed wearing, but it can be sometimes a little bit difficult to work it into to the rest of my wardrobe. So what I did do back in August, I don't remember when I published this video, but basically I had made a fall mood board of different, it's going to be a lot of background noise. I'm going to try to edit it out, but it is what it is. As I was saying, I made a mood board that had like different knitting and sewing inspiration. So my goal for my fall knitting plans was to find patterns that I could make with stash yarn, but that were also influenced by the type of clothing that I'm liking from ready to wear brands. So basically trying to be a little less influenced by the knitting online space and a little bit more influenced by the personal style, fashion, whatever you want to call it, online space. And just finding like that happy medium between the two. And as always with my knitting, I want to make things that I enjoy making and I enjoy making. Like I'm a project knitter and a process knitter. Like I want harmony between those two. So for the sake of organization, I have categorized these patterns into a few different, I've categorized them into a few different categories. That's not redundant at all. And in this video, I may be looking down at my notes a little bit more than usual, just because A, I did write these notes quite a while ago, and B, usually like in my knitting podcast, I'm actively knitting on the things, so they're fresh in my mind, they're in front of me, I can talk about them, whereas these are things I have not knit, so I have to look at the pictures and my notes to know what I'm talking about. So the categories I have are cables and textured knits pullover edition. Next category are cabled crewneck cardigans. Next, we have the color chocolate brown, which has been my favorite neutral over the past year or two. And then the last category for garments are colorwork sweater patterns, or like I think in my mood board I was saying like modernized Fair Isle, if you want to be proper about it, fancy about it. And then I also have a few categories that are not under the garment umbrella. There's a few accessories I would like to knit, a few socks, as well as two gift knits. So without further ado, let's move into textured and cabled knits pullover edition. So I am doing something a little bit different in this video where I am pulling in whips instead of purely things that I have not cast on yet, because the whips are not finished yet and some of them do fall into this category, so why not include them? The first of the texture knits is one that I am like 95% sure that I want to cast it on. It was in my make nines, it was in my spring knitting plans. It's a pattern that I have wanted to knit ever since I first started knitting and discovered Ravelry, and it is the Hana sweater by Junko Okamoto. This is just a stunning piece of art in my opinion. It has all different cable motifs going in different directions. It has this really cool patchwork style, and I always love a patchwork look. That's just my vibe. I think when I've spoken about this pattern in the past, one thing I really like about it is because there's so many different motifs. I don't think there will be a point in the sweater where I'm like, oh, I've been knitting this same pattern for like 50 rows at this point. I'm tired of it. No, because there's just so many different motifs. I'm not gonna run into that. So the yarn that I love to use for this sweater is Shelter by Brooklyn Tweed in the Fossil colorway, which is like a creamy grayish kind of color, and there's a very, very, very subtle. I I think calling them Tweety bits is reaching a little bit, but there's just these little nubs of yarn that are not the exact same color as the base. That's what I could say. I think I talked about this back in like my spring knitting plans or make 9 or whatever, but I like the idea of knitting a more complex sweater in a simple color just so that the star of the show is purely the stitch pattern and not the color. That's not to say that I will not have a color. I do not want to make a colorful cable sweater because that is going to be the next pattern in this category. But with this pattern, I just like to give it a try and have a basic sweater that's not boring. Because yeah, I feel like a lot of times I'm not really interested in knitting just like a plain white sweater. I'm sure I would get use out of the finished object, but the process of making it would probably not be the most interesting for me. Speaking of colorful cable sweaters, the next sweater is one that just got released. It is the Tulip, Tulip Loop Rollneck by Other Loops, and I am just obsessed with the larger cables in this design. I think it is absolutely stunning. Yes, it does kind of just look like an all over rib sweater where the ribs are really, really large. And I don't love to knit ribbing. However, the cables are enough interest that I think I could get over my mild dislike of ribbing. Also because it's like a larger rib, it's not as annoying as if it was like a 1x1 rib sweater or 2x2 rib sweater. One thing I really, really love about this sweater is how there is a different motif on the back. I think that just makes it look all the more interesting and kind of mimics what you would get from some designer brands like Cecily Bonson. Their cable sweaters over the last few years have always caught my eye. Whenever they go on sale at the end of season sale, I'm tempted to buy one. But then ever since I started knitting, I'm like, no, I cannot buy a sweater. I have not bought a single sweater, I don't think, since I started knitting because I've just been like determined, like, you can knit it, don't buy it. That's not to say like I'm telling other people they should not, other knitters, they shouldn't buy sweaters. This is just like my own personal philosophy. I think that back cable design is just what really made it stand out to me. And this is one of those sweaters that even though there is like the cable motif going on, and that could be the star of the show, I do think it'd be really fun to knit this in a bright color. And actually, somebody I follow on Instagram, Talks Knit, she knit this as a test knit, and she used this really bright green Gepard Garn yarn, and it looks stunning. I'm obsessed with it. I actually do have a very similar yarn in stash. It is Double Sunday and Tin Silk Mohair by Sandnes Garn in, is it called Jelly Bean Green? That really bright green color. I think the Double Sunday might be part of the Petite knit collection. Either way, the name will be on screen at some point. And yeah, I bought this sweater. I bought this yarn combination to knit. I don't remember the name of the sweater, but it's that Guernsey pattern by Sandnes Garn that is really, really popular. And I had been like fixating and obsessed with this sweater before I was able to finally like find where to purchase the pattern book and the yarn. And it's been 2 years and I have not even attempted to cast it on or swatch or anything like that. And while I still do really like that sweater, I think I'm more interested in knitting this sweater right now. And in the past, what I would have done is just kept on inevitably saving the yarn, saving the yarn, saving the yarn, and thinking, okay, I will make that sweater in the future. But I've come to the realization, partially because my yarn stash has gotten a little out of hand, but like I can always buy more yarn. This is something I've been implementing this year. If I have yarn saved for a project, but I am casting on a different project in like the present, there's really no point in saving the yarn. There's really no point in saving the yarn for a future project if I can use it in a present project. Because there's always more yarn to be purchased, and especially like with a commercially dyed yarn, if I decide I still want this Guernsey sweater, this bright green color, I can just buy more of it. So that is that. The last sweater I have in the category of like cable textured pullover sweaters is one that I have cast on back in the spring. It is the Esther sweater by Petite Knit, and this is a textured sweater, not a cable sweater. All the motifs that you see going on in the sweater are made with knit and purl stitches. Now, before I had cast this on, I actually thought that would make it easier than knitting cables and like quicker than knitting cables, but I actually think a cable sweater is easier to knit, and it knits more quickly. And I think that's because I guess A, I'm used to knitting cables at this point, and B, it's much easier to read my knitting in the cables. Whereas with this sweater, it's very difficult to read my knitting because you have multiple motifs going on, and they're all made with a mix of knit and purl stitches. On the right side of the fabric, it's okay to read the fabric, but on the wrong side, I get really confused, and then I end up having to rip back, and it's just like a whole thing. But because I am knitting the pullover version of this, I think once I join it in the round, it will not be as painful. I had put this on hold for the summer because the yarn combination that I'm using with this is not warm weather friendly. It is a strand of Nutiden in this like creamsicle orange color, as well as a strand of La Bien-Aimee silk mohair in the color Aimee's shawl, which has like shades of pink and orange and everything in between. It's such a pretty colorway. And these are actually two yarns that I had not bought thinking that I would use them together, but then when I just saw them together in my stash, it reminded me of this one painting, Flaming June. This is just meant to be. These just look so good together. It just has to happen. And knit up, it's just as pretty as I was expecting. I am kind of sad that La Bien-Aimee discontinued this base. So this is a silk mohair blend. I want to say it's a 70-30 blend, but if that's incorrect, I'll put the correct like percentages on the screen. And it has a 550 yard length for a 50-gram skein, which is very, very generous for a silk mohair. Alas, they have discontinued it, and now they have a more standard base that I think is closer to like 450 yards, which is pretty standard. And the reason why I liked that it had so much is because I could justify spending more on it because their silk mohair is like I think like almost like $10 more than other brands. Although if you do buy it directly from their site, and you're in the US and you wait for free shipping, promotion, because you do not pay VAT, it is a little bit less expensive. But yeah, basically because they have reformulated this base and now it's the same length as other dyers, I am less tempted to purchase it unless there's like a shade that I really, really like. That's it for the textured pullovers. Now we move into textured cardigans. And I talked about this a little bit, I think, in my mood board video, but I'm totally into the whole crewneck cardigan vibe. I feel like crewneck cardigans are very much having a moment. And even when that moment is over, it's totally fine because they're such a basic, classic staple piece that even if they're not quote unquote trendy, like they'll always be very wearable. So investing like 80 hours of my time or whatever to knit a crewneck cable cardigan, it's not going to be a waste, even when they're not trendy. Now, this category is the one that I was struggling the most to narrow down. So I think I have like 6 different cardigans. I'm not delusional enough to think that I can knit 6 cabled cardigans in 3 months. Ideally, I would like to just cast on one of them and then work on them into the winter. Let's see, I have separated them by gauge, and I guess we can start off with the one with the biggest gauge. The first cardigan is the Siri Cardigan Solo by Lay Knit. I was a little bit confused about the weight of this cardigan. It's listed as a DK weight cardigan. It is knit with I think 3 strands of yarn, and then one of the yarn suggestions, if you just want to use one single strand of yarn, is Sandnes Garn Poppy, which is a bulky weight yarn, and the gauge would match what I would expect for some bulky weight projects. So even though on Ravelry it is listed as DK weight, I am calling this a bulky weight. Let me look at the photo of this again. So this cardigan I feel like is pretty classic. I mean, all of these cardigans I could describe as classic. This one has moss stitch all over, and then you have two large cables on either side of the ribbing, and you do have a cable going down the sleeve. I do really like this cardigan, but if I'm being brutally honest, there's nothing about it that I'm like, wow, oh my god, this is amazing. I absolutely need this. That's not to say it's not beautiful. It's just like it doesn't have that something else. No, it's like an 8. It doesn't have that something else that would make it a 10, you know? And I also just loathe the knitting moss stitch. So some of these cardigans that have a lot of moss stitch on them, it makes it slightly less appealing to me. But the main reason why I'm interested in this cardigan is because I have this yarn combination that I swatched for my Moby sweater that I never ended up knitting, but I am obsessed with this swatch. The way that the fabric turned out, I think, is absolutely stunning, and it would really only work at a bulky weight gauge. It is a combination of Noro Silk Garden sock solo with a strand of the Hillesvog unspun wool in the cream color. And I think a lot of people would say, why are you using something with no plies or single ply and no ply yarn? In a cabled sweater, your cables will be so flat and muted. And to that, I will say I like that look. I think there is something to be said of knowing the rules and not the rules, knowing, I guess, suggestions and then making a choice to go against them. You know, I feel like it's one thing if when I was like a newer knitter and I just decided to try knitting cables with a single ply yarn, and then I'd be disappointed that the cables are looking flat, versus now that I'm more of an experienced knitter, knowing going in that, okay, I am using a single ply and an unspun wool, so my cables will be flatter, but that is the look I'm going for, you know? Anyway, so I think this fabric is just beautiful, and if I don't knit this cardigan, I think I will knit some sort of cabled cardigan with this yarn combination in the future. The next 3 cardigans are all, I guess you could say, at a worsted weight gauge. The yarn combination I would use for any of these sweaters is this Nutiden in a very like swampy brownish green color. And I know swampy is not maybe a very flattering adjective, but I really, really like this color. Just like call me Shrek, I am embracing the swamp. Yeah, like a very murky color. And I have 2 different silk mohairs that I could hold with this, and depending on which one I chose, it would give like a different vibe. So first is knitting for olive silk mohair in the color Dusty Artichoke if I wanted to lean into the green in this unspun wool. And then the other option is, I want to say hazel brown. I bought both of these silk mohairs like over 2 years ago, so they are deep stash, and I don't remember the name of this brown because they have so many browns, but it will be on the screen. And yeah, I think either of these silk mohairs would pair really well with this unspun wool. If I was going for like a more neutral vibe, I'd probably stick with the brown. If I wanted to lean a little bit into the green undertones, I'd go with the Dusty Artichoke. Now, the 3 patterns I had in mind as possibilities for this yarn combination. First is the Beatrix cardigan by Gregoria Fibers, and this one again has like large cables down the sleeves and then a cable on either side of the ribbing, similar to that Siri cardigan solo. And then there's also the Harboji cardigan by Agio Knits, which this one has a really interesting construction. I think it is similar to the Yura sweater, which I also knit by them last year, where you cast on for a sleeve, knit up, knit across the body, and then cast on, knit down to the other sleeve before binding off. And the side to side construction is different from most other garments where you knit them either bottom up or top down, and it makes for an interesting fit. I also just think this cardigan looks so incredibly cozy. It definitely reminds me more of like a jacket versus a cardigan. Like I could see myself wearing just like a proper long sleeve tee or like a turtleneck underneath, and then just wearing this as like an outer layer when it's like, let's say in like the 50s or 60s. And I really, really love the combination of different cable stitches that you have going on in the sleeves. But again, on the body, there is a lot of moss stitch going on, which does make me hesitant a little bit because I don't love moss stitch. But I also have this cardigan pattern. So that is a plus. I already have it in my pattern library. The last possible pattern that I can knit with this yarn combination is the newest pattern. It is the Dagmar Jacket by Petite Knit, and I love this sweater. Again, it has so many different cable motifs going on. I like how that you have a mix of larger cable motifs next to smaller cable motifs, and there's much less moss stitch going on in here, and I would like, give me cables over moss stitch any day of the week. I will happily knit more cables and less moss stitch. This cardigan actually does remind me a lot of the book club cardigan by Sari Nordland. What was I saying? Oh yeah, the book club cardigan by Sari Nordland. I think the biggest difference is that the book club cardigan has a V-neck, and I'm definitely on the market for a crew neck. Also, I think the book club cardigan has a little bit more moss stitch versus the Dagmar jacket. One thing that I don't love in either of these patterns is that at the shoulders, the cable motifs on the front and the back don't line up. Like, they meet up in different parts of the cable repeat. So if I were to knit this Dagmar jacket, I think I would try to shift the cables so that they mirror on the shoulders, because that is just my preference. I mean, I think the reason that they do that is so that on the front and the back, when you're ending it, you end, I guess, at after a complete cable repeat, but I tend to crop my sweaters anyways, and I wouldn't mind stopping in like the middle of a cable repeat. Okay, so those are the worsted weight patterns. Alas, we have even more patterns. We have two. Why do I keep saying the royal we? I have two more patterns. This is the Smocky cardigan by Monmi Choi, and just like looking at all these cardigans and writing up all these notes has been an interesting study in dissecting what makes me like a cabled cardigan and what makes me less interested in a cable cardigan. And I'm realizing I really like when there is a mix of cables, a mix of motifs, and I think that just like adds visual interest. This one uses the smock stitch, which I think is a stitch that's used in the Jenny jacket. So that does make me a little bit hesitant to knit this, because I have heard that that stitch is really annoying to knit, because you have to knit like several rows, I think, to get one row in length. Something like that. I don't really know the specifics, and I've never really been tempted to knit any of the Jenny patterns because of that. But when you combine the smock stitch with all these different cable motifs, I really like the way that it looks. And I can't deny that I have also been influenced by the way that the cardigan is styled in the pattern photos. I love the way it's styled. It's totally something that I would wear, and that has definitely influenced me into wanting to knit this more. So the yarn combination that I would use for this, or possibly the next cardigan that I will talk about, is this West Yorkshire Spinners in this alpaca wool blend that I have a ton of. This was, I think, like some of the first yarn I ever bought. I don't think I would hit gauge with the wool alone, so I have this Farmer's Daughter Fibers Surrey alpaca in a similar colorway that I would hold together to hit the gauge. And then the other possible cardigan that I can knit with this yarn combination is the Honeycomb cardigan by Sedna Yang. Whatever like the pattern equivalent of Deep Stash is, like this pattern is deep in my Ravelry library. I bought this so long ago. Again, I love the mix of all the different cables it's got going on, but the main reason I'm really interested in the cardigan is this one specific detail. It is a way that the pockets are constructed in this cardigan. I think it looks so clean and very reminiscent of some ready to wear sweaters, because I feel like a lot of times with hand knit sweaters, you just knit like a square and then stitch it down. I've never really been interested in that, but I think the way that the pockets are constructed in this sweater look very clean, and there's a specific name for it. It's called a diagonal pocket. So I would love to knit this sweater, just like, even if I didn't really enjoy the pattern or the look of the cardigan, which I do, I think it would be worth it just to learn this technique, because it's totally something I would love to incorporate into other sweater or cardigan patterns. I am kind of curious if there's a way to line the pocket with fabric, because that is kind of also my fear and why I have never added any pockets to my cardigans, because I kind of just assumed they would stretch out the second like I tried to put my phone or something relatively heavy in there. Like if I put like a hair tie or something, it'd be fine. But like my phone, my card case, even like a key, my AirPods, I feel like I would just be afraid of the pocket getting stretched out. Something for me to consider. So that is the last of that category. The next category is a color, and it is chocolate brown, my favorite neutral of the moment. I just have one stockinette sweater in this category. That's not to say that I won't knit other stockinette projects. It's just I only have one specific one in my plans. I have a feeling I will probably cast on others during this period of time. First stockinette sweater I am interested in knitting by the end of the year, let's say, is the Aimee sweater by Petite Knit. Now, I am not one who is generally interested in purchasing plain stockinette sweater patterns. There's just so many good free ones out there, and ones that I've already knit or in my pattern library. And yeah, I feel like if I'm going to purchase a stockinette sweater pattern, it's probably going to be because it has a different kind of construction or something interesting going on. When it comes to Raglan's, like it's pretty much all already out there for free. But I think Petite Knit is so good at just adding in these little details that elevates a sweater pattern that I'm like, okay, girl, you got my $7. You did it. I will give you my money. And the reason why I really, really like this sweater is, first of all, I love the chunky ribbing, and then it looks like there's some sort of like garter stitch at the end of the ribbing. And if it was just that, like I could just modify a pattern I already have in my library. But it looks like there is some sort of neck shaping going on, similar to what you would get in like a drop shoulder or a contiguous sleeve construction. I've never seen that combined with a raglan, and I really like the way that the yoke seems to sit on her in the pattern photos, because one of the issues I do often have with raglans is I don't like when they're so wide that it looks like a boat neck, but also when they're too high up, they can be kind of choking. And I'm curious to see if that neck shaping kind of is a happy medium between those two problems, because it does seem like the raglan starts relatively low, but because of the neck shaping, it just brings in the neck a little bit and makes it the perfect fit. That is that. The last category of garments are colorwork, or what was I saying, like modernized Fair Isle. If you've been watching any of my recent podcasts, you know that I've definitely been on a colorwork kick. I won't talk too much about the first pattern in this category because I talked about it at length in my previous podcast episode, and I'll probably talk about it more in my following podcast episode, and most likely we'll have a dedicated video to it. It is the Orkney sweater by Marie Wallen. This is an all over traditional looking Fair Isle sweater. It is a cardigan. The pattern is written to be knit bottom up and flat, but I have adjusted it to be top down and in the round so that I can steek it. I'm also modifying the sleeves to be striped, inspired by this Molly Goddard sweater from a few years ago that I was obsessed with, am obsessed with, and I'm using a bunch of different yarns for it, and that's its own thing. And I must admit, my interest in colorwork and Fair Isle sweaters this season is definitely inspired by ready-to-wear garments. I feel like in the past I have admired Fair Isle sweaters, but I haven't really thought about how they would be incorporated into my wardrobe, or haven't necessarily felt modern to me. But I think like the real catalyst was once Loewe started releasing their campaign photos for this year and like their menswear collection from this year. They have a lot of great Fair Isle sweaters, and it just brought Fair Isle to the front of my mind. And like the Molly Goddard sweater that I said I've been inspired by has just been something I've been thinking of like every winter since it came out. It's like been in my Net-a-Porter wish list. Even though it's sold out, it's like still there, my wish list, and I just like looking at it because it's so pretty. Now I will have my own hand knit inspired version. The next sweater in this category is, I think, the only sweater in this video where I don't necessarily have a whole sweater quantity of yarn to knit this in. On one hand, I'm like, because this, let's talk about the pattern first. It is the Nordic Mix sweater by Laura Dalgard. I bought this sweater right as it was released last winter. I have been wanting to cast it on forever. I'm just obsessed with the way the sweater looks. It uses a lot of, I guess, more classic motifs, but then it's the way that the motifs are put into the sweater. It kind of almost reminds me of like a jigsaw. I don't know. I really love the vibe of it. And if you look on Ravelry, there's so many great project pages. People have made low contrast versions. People have made high contrast versions, and they're all stunning. There's no bad combinations under that Ravelry page. They're all so beautiful. I did purchase some yarn to make this, but I ended up using the yarn in a different project. So that's kind of how I was justifying thinking of purchasing yarn for this sweater. The goal is that hopefully at least one of the colors that I use in the sweater will be from Stash, and then the other one I can maybe buy. So the first color combination I was thinking of for this is I have this Peace Fleece in this blue color, and I really like the way that it looks on the skin. I'm just not sure how much I would enjoy wearing it, and I also have so much of this yarn because I had initially bought it to knit the Hana sweater, but once I started knitting it up, I realized I didn't really like the way it was looking. Then I was thinking, what's one way to make this blue more palatable on my skin tone? Maybe it is to combine it with a color that I would enjoy wearing more. So I looked under the Ravelry project pages for this color of Peace Fleece and came up with like a few possible color combinations. The most obvious one is navy, because using like different shades, values. I don't really know the correct color terminology, but let's just call them shades. Using same shades of the same color, I think is like always a safe bet. So using a navy and a light blue would look so good together. My only thing with that is I'm just not sure how I would wear that. I don't think I would like the way it looks with blue jeans. And I don't know how I'd feel about the way it looks with black bottoms or white bottoms. Yeah, so that's my hesitancy of using the navy. The next color combination would be to use a dark brown. I feel like I've been seeing a lot of projects with like a chocolatey brown and blue, and like I already said, chocolate brown has been my favorite color of the moment. So that is another possibility. And then the last possibility is a pretty classic color combination is blue and white. I always love the way that other people's projects look in blue and white, but I'm always like, I don't know how I would look in blue and white if I would want to wear it. So yeah, that this one is a little bit of a conundrum. The other option that I was thinking of is that this could possibly be my advent project for this year, where I fade. My advent is a fade, so I purchased the Narnia advent in the non-superwash fingering weight base from Through the Wardrobe Yarn Co. So I would use the advent as one color and then pick some sort of dark color as my contrast color, because pretty sure the advent is like a pastel fade. So if I used like dark brown, dark pink, even like a black could work. I don't think I would use a black though, but some sort of like dark rich color I think could work as a contrast. And then yeah, I would just fade the advent as the other color, holding the fingering weight yarn double stranded. The issue with that is I'm just not sure if I would be able to hit gauge, because this is a worsted weight pattern and holding the pastel yarn, the fingering weight yarn double. I don't think I would be able to hit gauge. I would probably have to go up several sizes in the sweater and kind of like regrade it to meet by gauge. That's something I'm gonna think about for December. I have also kind of been thinking about doing some sort of informal advent knit along, where we just try to knit a sweater, a scarf, a pair of socks, whatever you want from December until Christmas. And if you want to use an advent calendar, you could do that. Last year, something fun that I did on Instagram is I had like a few chats with people where we would just share like what our advent color of the day was. And it was just fun to see like other people's advent calendars, because I always love seeing like the inspiration of the advents when they're coming out in the spring. But then I think things are just like very busy in December, and maybe a lot of dyers take breaks, so then I can't I don't end up seeing like the final result of the advent, even though I really like the inspiration images. So just having that back and forth with other people was fun. Also, I was just very excited to open my first yarn advent, and I just wanted to share it with people. That is, if you would be interested in that, do let me know. Maybe I would just make like an Instagram group chat, depending on how many people were interested in it. Or it could even be December 1st to December 31st if you do not celebrate Christmas. And then I guess the other aspect would be just sharing your yarn advent colors. Yeah. If you're interested in that, do let me know, and it is something I will consider. It'll be like very informal. There won't be like any prizes or rules or guidelines or anything like that. It'll just be for fun, for the vibes, for the holiday cheery vibes. Oh, and then the last sweater pattern I have in this category is another sweater that I've already cast on, and it is my advent project from last year. It is the Oba sweater by Aigyo Knits, and I think this sweater is so beautiful. I think the advent calendar that I bought last year was so beautiful. I bought Fiber Fox's, I think it was called the Golden Hour Advent on the Surrey base, and oh my god, the fade looked so good on the Surrey. It just blends in so nicely, and they did such a good job of dyeing this. It's a beautiful, beautiful advent, and I love the Surrey base. I was very, very tempted to get their advent again this year. I think I was on vacation when the pre-order released, and then by the time like I remembered, or by the time I looked at it, it was already sold out. Also, I think this year they used like a gray and a black in the fade, and I just wasn't sure if I could incorporate that into my projects. But I'm so looking forward to the reveal of their advent calendar this year. Back to the pattern, or my sweater. So like I said, this is a two-color Colorwork sweater. So I am using the Advent faded as one color, and then for my other color, I'm using a strand of Nutiden and Isagar, whatever you want to say, alpaca in a purpley color. And this yarn combination, or this color combination, is not one I would usually wear, but I really love the way that it's knitting up. I have been also thinking of what I could wear with it. Like definitely could go with a pair of blue jeans, but in my like fall mood board, I also said that I would like to sew up some brown bottoms, be it pants, be it skirts, be it a dress, and I feel like this color combination that I've got going on would also really look good with like a dark brown mini skirt. And in an ideal world, I would get this done before December, before I cast on my next Advent project. I also don't know how realistic that is because I have to finish my Rhinebeck sweaters, and that's like the middle of October. Then I have the Hana sweater that I want to knit. And yeah, I'm not sure how long the Ova sweater will take me. Maybe I'll make it a goal to at least like finish the body before December. I also, speaking of advents, I also just have so many different non-traditional advent project ideas, because I feel like when it comes to advents, a lot of people recommend either doing like a blanket or a scarf or just like a plain fade, which are all really, really cute ideas. Don't get me wrong. But I also kind of like thinking out of the box and coming up with other pattern ideas. And there are definitely people on Ravelry who have had the same idea. That's how I came up with the idea for this Oba sweater, because somebody on Ravelry did knit this sweater where they did like a fade with 3 or 4 colors. And I just thought I could do the same thing, but with 24 colors. So if you're interested in a video about possible non-traditional advent projects, let me know, and I can share that maybe end of October, November-ish, because if you want to make your own advent or have to buy matching yarn for your advent, whatever, it's probably better for that video to come out earlier. Okay, so I believe that is the end of the garment projects. Yes, the next category are accessories, and I only really have 2 accessories with concrete plans. So I keep saying that I want to knit a pair of convertible mittens or fingerless gloves to wear to go when I like go walking in the afternoons or the evenings. And I have knit so many single mittens. I have even knit some mittens where I've knit like 1.5 mittens, but the fit is just never right, and then I end up frogging them. So this year I am determined to make a proper pair of mittens that fit me well. And I really, really like this cable pattern that I bought last year. It is the Mondial Mittens by Claire Borchardt. Borchardt. Apologies if any of that pronunciation is wrong. So these are a sport weight cable knit pattern where it's convertible, so you can like open the top so your fingers can be free and you can use your phone and all that stuff. Yeah, I think this pattern just looks like very clean and chic and classic. So to lean into that, I would love to knit it in this black yarn. This is a superwash merino yarn DK weight or light DK weight sport weight by Circulo. Again, unsure about the pronunciations. Apologies for any mistakes. I actually bought this yarn last year to give a try or in the beginning of this year, maybe. I don't remember. Last winter, let's say, to see if I would like to use it for some gift knits because it is a pretty affordable superwash merino yarn, so it'd be easy to take care of, but it's still 100% wool, and it also came in a nice selection of colors. It doesn't have like the biggest color range, but it was a decent selection of colors. And I just bought the black because that's something I could easily use for an accessory. And if I did have some left over, I think I would try to make like either ear warmers or a cowl or something like that to pair with the mittens. I think actually, yeah, like a simple ear warmer to match some mittens would be cute. And maybe I could use the same cable motif. I just have to see how many yards what was it? Ear cuff? A headband. I just have to see how many yards a headband like that would use. I will say for garments, I generally prefer non-superwash wools for a variety of reasons, but for accessories and specifically like things I'm using near my face, like the headband sort of thing, I do prefer to use superwash wool because I do wash those things more frequently because they are touching my skin more and like specifically my face. I don't want to get breakouts because I'm using the same hat or whatever over again and again and again without washing it. And again with like mittens, like touching everything in the outside world, I would want to wash those more frequently, and the ease of the superwash is nice in that case. The other accessory that I would like to knit is not one that has like a specific pattern. I just like to knit some big hair bows. And again, my inspiration for this comes from Damson Matter. I just want to knit like everything that they make. Like I just want to like sew and knit dupes of everything that they make. Their whole aesthetic this year has just been, I mean, the aesthetic in the past has been good too, but I feel like this year, like everything they make, I just want. And most of the time, it probably would be cheaper to buy it versus making it, but what's the fun in that? There is some fun, but it's even more fun to be like, oh yeah, I made it. I made that. This is the two inspiration for the bows. One is just like a plain, it looks like it's a double knit fabric, and then just tied in a bow. And the other one is this bigger crochet bow, and I think it'd be easy to knit something like this instead of crochet. Yeah, so that is it for the accessories. Next up, we have some socks, and these are socks from the 52 Weeks of Socks Volume 2 book, which I checked out from my local library. So I didn't pick out any specific yarns for, I guess, the hair bows and also these socks, because I just have a ton of sock yarns, and I think I would just like pick the yarn in the moment that I cast on, like whatever color I'm feeling, I would just pick from stash. First, we have the Havoc Mix pattern by Alex Bird. And I think the fringe on these look really, really cool. And I actually really like the color that the samples are knit in. Like you have that dark background and then just this really vibrant fringe color. And this is a pair of socks that I think would really, really look cute in a pair of Mary Janes. So maybe a more neutral color for the base and then some fun pop of color for the fringe. I also think this is my favorite kind of sock pattern where you do have like something of interest going on in the leg or the cuff, and then The rest of the sock is just a vanilla sock, and it's an easy, mindless knit. The second sock pattern that I would like to knit is the Romance sock by Tricot and Stitch. This is a heavily textured sock with this traditional Estonian stitch pattern on the top of the sock. It does look like a lot of work, but I think it would be worth it because it's so beautiful. And again, I think this is another sock that would look so cute in a pair of Mary Janes, because since the top of your foot is visible, you would see more of that stitch pattern when wearing that sort of shoe. I'm not sure what color I would knit this in, but I do really like the mauve color the sample is knitted in. And it's also a toe-up pattern, so I could try the Flegel heel again, which I learned this summer, and I enjoyed knitting it and I enjoy the fit of it. Okay, so my last sock for 52 weeks of socks is actually moving into the next and last category, which is gift knits, and it is the Near Kiss socks. Not necessarily relevant to the design, but I thought it was cool that the designer said that the name, it's named after the Baltic Finnic god of hunting. So, like I said, this is again like my favorite kind of pattern. You have this colorwork on the cuff. It's quite a long cuff, but then the rest of the sock is just like a plain vanilla stockinette sock. My fear, though, is I've heard so many people say that colorwork socks are difficult to get the right fit on. A lot of them just end up too tight. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to knit the largest size and knit it as a gift for somebody, for a man, basically. I'll knit like whatever that size is. And then if it doesn't fit them and it ends up being smaller, I can gift it to somebody who has a smaller foot. As far as colors for this, I do like the blue green. Yes, I do like the blue green color palette that the sample is knit in. Okay, I have one last pattern, one last gift knit, one last knit that I would like to make this fall, and it is a baby knit because my cousin in India has had a new baby daughter born last month, and my parents are going to go visit them in November, so I would love to knit something for her. And what I'm planning on making is the baby bear hoodie, and this is a free pattern. It was really hard to narrow down because there's so many cute baby patterns and there's so many cute free baby patterns, so the options are truly endless. I thought it would be best to knit a cardigan just because it's India, it's hot, they can leave it open. Also, I feel like a cardigan will be able to fit the baby for a longer period of time versus a pullover. And I think I'm going to try to knit maybe a 6 month or 9 month size. I have to look at the size chart for the sweater because by the time she gets it, she will be 3 months old. Maybe I will ask my cousin size or what size clothing my mom is buying for the baby and figure it out. I've also been working on a quilt to give her, but that is unrelated to my fall knitting plans or end of the year knitting plans. The yarn that I want to use for this cardigan is this Rowan cotton that I have a ton of in this pretty purple color, and I think it will look very cute as this hoodie cardigan thing. This baby bear cardigan. Yes, that is a name. So that is a wrap on all these cardigans, all these patterns on my end of the year knitting plans. I should reiterate, I don't know if I've said it in this video, but I've definitely said it in the past that I don't see my plans or these videos as strict guidelines. Knitting is for fun. Making these plans and this video is for fun. It's really not that serious. I'm not going to hold myself like, oh, you have to knit like at least like 25% of these patterns. Like, you can only knit things in this video. Like, no, that's silly. That will suck out the fun of things for me. I just like having these as a guideline. So when I feel like casting on something new, I'm not tempted to go run to the yarn store and find something new. I can instead be like, hey, I have this yarn, I have this pattern in mind, let's make it. Let's make it happen. And obviously there's way, way more patterns in this video than I could feasibly knit in 3 months. But because I have all this yarn in stash, I wanted to give myself options. Okay, so that's the end of this video. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. As always, I would love to know what you are knitting on or working on. I always find such great pattern suggestions from those comments. If you have things that you would like to make this fall or through 2024. Also, feel free to share those. I would love to know. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like and follow along to see more videos. I think my next video will probably be a knitting podcast. I'll try to get that done before Rhinebeck. I'm not sure if I'm going to have a video about Rhinebeck because I'm not that comfortable filming in public, but I'll definitely have a video on my Rhinebeck sweater, which is again the Orkney sweater. I don't think I have anything else to say, so once again, thank you for watching. I hope to see you again in the future. Happy knitting, and bye.